Central Illinois is the CI in ciLiving.
On November 4th, 1979, the Iran hostage crisis began after the U.S. Embassy in Tehran was stormed. It was the start of the longest hostage crisis recorded in history. One of the hostages was a U.S. Marine from Homer, Illinois. His name is Paul Lewis. Paul, I'm glad to have you here with us.
Thanks, Grace. Good to be here.
Yes, okay. So obviously you have an incredible story to tell, one that not many had to endure. But I want to take us back all the way to November 3rd, 1979. Will you just take us back there?
Sure. I woke up, I was in Frankfurt because I had to stay over. And I got to the airport in the morning, and first trip on the Autobahn, we were driving 100 mile an hour in this Mercedes cab. I got to the airport, it was foggy, they weren't about the plane's going to be late, and I think I don't want to do this. And back then, Pan Am had a flight 1 and 2. They both went around the world. I was on, I don't know, 1 or 2, but I was on this worldwide flight. So the plane got there a little bit late, but we were going to make our time. It was a direct flight to Tehran. And it was an experience in itself. It was like being in the UN. I don't know how many languages the flight attendants spoke, but and a lot of Middle Easterners and people going farther. And honestly, I was afraid they were going to light a fire in the aisle because people were doing things in the aisle. They weren't sitting down. And when they rang the bell and told us to buckle up, I noticed a lot of the women started putting the chadors on. They were dressed Western with makeup, and then they started covering up. And my introduction to, I guess what we call now was a failed state, happened about 15 minutes later. I got to the airport, I thought there was a riot, but it was just people excited because everyone had bags of gifts and clothing and things from London or Frankfurt, wherever they'd been. And I saw 3 Marines in the front of the crowd, and I thought, well, I'm safe.
So you had just arrived in Tehran. Obviously, set the scene of the airport. You're mentioning that all of this unrest is kind of happening as you're arriving. What did it look like when you landed?
Well, it was, first thing I noticed is there were a bunch of people with blue jeans and field jackets with rifles. Most those people I met didn't speak English, but they had to see your passport. They could say that. And I remember them fumbling around with it. There was one policeman standing in a corner that didn't do anything. And then I went through customs, and they told us to pack our uniforms on the bottom of our sea bags so they wouldn't be seen. And they kind of rummaged through. But before that, when you checked in, and they checked make sure you had a visa. And mine was interesting because when I was transferred, the revolution was in full force. And the Iranian embassy was reluctant to give me a visa because the visa stamp said the Imperial Republic of Iran. So our consular officer convinced them just mark it out and write the Islamic Republic. And I wish I could have that passport because that was the visa looked like. They told you to declare cash. You don't carry much cash on these trips, particularly to someplace like that. So I had about $50. I laid on the counter. The guy just swept it in the drawer and said, go, move on. The lady at customs was really reasonable. She spoke perfect English. She'd probably studied here, and she didn't bother me at all. I walked got to the 3 Marines who were waiting for me through the throng of people waiting for their relatives. And we got in a van, and I could tell it was armored because it was really squishy. It was too heavy for the frame. And we never stopped between the embassy and Tehran. We ran all the lights like everybody else was doing. And it was eerie. It seemed dark, but on about every second corner, there was a bunch of guys with rifles and field jackets around burning cans. And occasionally, a pickup truck with an automatic rifle. We finally got to the embassy, and I had to drive around a little bit because somebody had taken a Khomeini poster down off of our wall, and there were a group of people upset about it, and the security officer was negotiating them to go away, and then went into the motor pool. I did a tour of the embassy with the gunny, and I remember joking. I said, I spent 2 years in the infantry. I'm not afraid of anything, but I want to go get on a plane and leave. We have 14 acres, 27 acres, 14 Marines, 35 buildings. We can't defend this place. I did notice when we walked around, there'd been virtually no security improvements. They tried to kill everybody in the previous February on Valentine's Day. And they put some metal casements about halfway up the windows of the offices, but the Marine Guard booth still had 2 rounds hanging in the bulletproof glass. When you walked on the carpet, you could kind of kick up the tear gas smell. I thought we're just not prepared for this. We're in a lot of trouble.